Hey guys, it's Miss Miles here. We're going to start on day 6 of Unit 1. We're going to talk about characteristics of life. When we're studying biology, remember, biology is the study of life. So we need to start off with, what is life? A definition of life. So think about if an alien were to come down to our planet and that alien saw cars, being driven by people, cars moving around. um, would that alien think that cars are living because they're moving? Is moving a characteristic of life? So, those are the things that we're going to work through today. You have a couple of things that you're going to do today. If you will look on your home page, so I'm here on Biology 1, I'm on Unit 1, I'm on the home page, I'm on day 6. There is an Amoeba Sister Characteristics of Life video. It's a really good video, so you'll need to watch that after you watch this video. And then you also need to pull up 1.08 Characteristics of Life notes. There are, it's called notes, but there's really two sets of notes today. So you're going to be filling in this, and it says notes, but it's really just you going through, looking at pictures and deciding which characteristic of life better matches each picture. So as you go through, just match those up. But if you can pull that up, that would be awesome because I am going to go through those in just a second with you. Another thing, you need to turn in your workbook. I'm going to switch to my other platform now. But we'll go through these characteristics of life in just a second. So on your page, you see all of these different pictures, and we'll come back to those and talk about each one of those. But you are on page 7 on your workbook. Remember, our workbook is an area where we can use that workbook to take notes. So we're going to take notes on page 7 today on characteristics of living things. So the first thing, you'll need to number 1 through 8. Now, we say 8, but you could really classify characteristics of life and not necessarily put a number on it. You could say 6, 7, 8. But these are just characteristics. What do all living things have in common? Tomorrow's topic, or the next day's topic, is on viruses. I've said this before. Many scientists don't believe viruses are living because they don't really meet all of the criteria to be considered a living thing. Here on Earth, we're all carbon based life forms. We all have molecules in our body that are made of carbon and other elements: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sometimes sulfur. Um, but we are all carbon based life forms. And so, what characteristics do we have to be considered living? The very first one that you'll see already on your page, and I just labeled that number 1, made up of cells. All living things have to have cells. Now, cells are the smallest units of living things. I'm going to put this to the side. It really only takes one cell to be considered living. So, a one celled organism is called a unicellular organism. Uni means one. If you were to ride a unicycle, it would just have, it's a bicycle, but with just one wheel. So unicellular, uni referring to one, that's just one cell. So really, to be considered a living thing, you only have to have one cell. Now, one-celled organisms are very, very tiny. A lot of those are called protists, and we'll talk about kingdoms at a later time, but they are in the Protista kingdom. A lot of those live in the soil. A lot of those live in pond water. So unicellular organisms, you only have to have one cell to be considered living. Um, the next characteristic of life, and you can really put these in any order. You don't necessarily have to put them in this order that I'm going through. But the next characteristic of life that I'm going to mention here is homeostasis. All living things have to be able to maintain a stable internal environment, or maintain stable internal conditions. What that means is that in your body right now, you are maintaining a stable temperature. Your cells are maintaining a steady amount of water. Your cells are maintaining a steady amount of sodium versus potassium. You are constantly trying to keep a stable internal balance. Your blood pH is maintained every day. In fact, blood pH is something that if it gets off by just a little bit, that could be deadly. So you work very hard, your body works very hard to maintain homeostasis. If you break down that word, homeo means the same, stasis is the state of being. So it's really saying it's the state of being the same. So we work very hard. Our bodies work very hard to maintain stable internal conditions. Even a single-celled organism works very hard to maintain stable internal conditions as well. The next thing, we use energy. All living things have to have energy. All living things have to get energy. Think about us. We use energy we get energy from the food that we eat. So we have to take in food, break down that food to get that energy. Plants, they're going to get energy from from sunlight. So they're going to take in that energy through the process of photosynthesis. They're going to convert that into usable energy. So when we use energy, we go through a process called metabolism. That's all of the chemical reactions in our body. You may have heard the word metabolism before. Someone might say, I have a fast metabolism, I have a slow metabolism. So, metabolism is really just talking about all of the chemical reactions in your body, how you break down food, how you build up other molecules in your body. So, every living thing has to use energy, and you do that through metabolism. As you get older, your metabolism tends to slow down. You being young, you probably have a pretty fast metabolism. So you can eat things that, are not necessarily good for you and maybe not gain weight. But as you get older, your metabolism slows down. So when you're my age, if you have the same diet as you did when you were a teenager, you're definitely going to gain weight because your metabolism slows down. So using energy is we're listing it as the third characteristic of life. Respond to stimuli. All living things have to respond or be able to respond to a stimulus. So, for example, um, if your finger is poked or pricked, you're going to respond. If you touch a hot stove, you're going to immediately pull your hand back from that hot stove. So, all living things have to be able to respond to a stimuli. Here are some examples of responding to a stimulus: shivering. When you're cold outside, you're going to start to shiver. That's your body's way of producing heat. Sweating when you're really, really hot. What ends up happening is your blood vessels will come to the surface of your skin. So your face might get really, really red because the blood is just right below the surface of the skin. And then eventually you will sweat. Your sweat glands will start producing sweat. And the way that cools you down is that is moisture on the surface of your skin that evaporates. Through that process of evaporation, that cools you down. That's called evaporative cooling. And then another response to stimuli, plants will grow towards light, and that's pretty awesome. So if you have a plant that's in a room and you have a window on the other side, you will eventually see that plant start growing towards that light source. So all living things have to respond to stimuli. Reproduction. This is where scientists differ with their estimation of viruses as being living things. So all living things have to be able to reproduce, but viruses cannot reproduce on their own. Viruses have to have another cell to be able to reproduce. So that's where they sort of differ with the normal definition of reproduction. And I just wanted to point out there's a couple of different types of reproduction. There's sexual, And you know what sexual reproduction involves? It's the uniting of an egg and a sperm cell. And then there's asexual. Asexual reproduction is something that we may not think about, but lots of organisms may reproduce asexually. They may have both sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. Think about strawberry plants. I don't know if you've ever grown strawberries, but they can reproduce in the garden by runners. And that runner will just be a fragment of the plant that runs off in another direction, and it's going to go make a whole new plant. But that new plant will be exactly the same as the previous plant. And then strawberries, we know we've all eaten strawberries. They have strawberry seeds, and seeds would be a way for sexual reproduction to occur. Budding, fission, fragmentation. We've talked a little bit when we were doing graphing about bacteria. Bacteria will reproduce by fission. That's really just making a new cell. It's splitting into two. So it's one cell splitting into two. Fragmentation. Think about if we have something like a sponge and part of it breaks off, that will make a whole new organism. Or budding is another way. It's like the organism just grows a whole new individual, and that's pretty amazing. So reproduction, sexual and asexual. Growth and development is another characteristic of life. Organisms have to be able to grow, so they get bigger in size, and they also have to develop, so they change over time. So, growth and development, those are both types of characteristics of living things. And, why we have 8 on our list. You could really divide that and really have 9. You can have growth and development, as two separate parts there. The next one we're going to put on the list is evolve. All living things adapt to their environment. Over time, those adaptations may get selected for, and that's the process of evolution. So organisms will evolve and they will adapt and change over time. The last thing we're going to put on our list is contain DNA. All living things have to have DNA. DNA is really a code, a shorthand for deoxyribonucleic acid. But DNA makes up every chromosome in our body. As humans, we have 46 chromosomes. So DNA is determining all of our traits. DNA is controlling every part of our bodies. It's controlling all the actions in our bodies. And so living organisms have to have DNA. So those are the characteristics of life. So you'll go through and write all of this on page 7 of your workbook. Once you're finished with that, make sure that you have the other document pulled up. I'll go back to that document. That other document is 1.08. It's called Characteristics of Life. So you're going to go through and you're going to determine which picture matches with which characteristic of life. So make sure to pull that up. I'm going to go back through this other document here and just talk about these. So if you'll look at this picture, this is showing a cell, and within the cell, you have a nucleus. Within the nucleus, you have chromosomes. And then if you look at that small portion of that chromosome, you'll see that it's made up of DNA. So this picture is really representing that all living things have DNA. The next picture, this is showing balance, and it's a pretty cool picture showing balance. So when we talk about and think about balance in the human body or in other organisms, we're talking about homeostasis. Remember, that word in and of itself means maintaining balance, maintaining internal conditions. This one, I love this picture. This is a polar bear. A polar bear has so many different adaptations for living in the wild. And you can really sort of see through this polar bear here. Of course, he has this fur. Um, there's unique things about the polar bear's fur. His skin underneath is black. He is adapted to living in a wintry environment. Notice his big paws here. They're almost like built-in snowshoes for walking on top of a snowy ground. or a big area of packed snow. So he is perfectly adapted. He is evolved to be a top predator in his environment. The next one, if you'll notice here, we start off with a baby and she is developing and growing. She's changing in height. She's changing overall, all into adulthood. And so this is a good representation for us of growth and development. This next one, this is showing at the top here. This is sexual reproduction. This is a sperm uniting with an egg to make a zygote, which is a fertilized egg cell. And then at the bottom here is asexual reproduction. This is binary fission. This is how bacteria are going to reproduce. So usually the DNA in bacteria is just coiled in the middle of the cell. They'll reproduce that DNA and then they'll simply split in half. And then one cell becomes two, so on and so forth. This next picture, this person is shivering. He is cold. He is trying to warm up his body. So he is responding to a stimulus. The stimulus in this case is the cold. So his body is shivering. If you were to put your hand on a hot stove, you would respond to that stimulus right away and you would pull your hand back. I really like this picture right here. This is showing a plant and it's showing sunlight. And remember, plants have to have sunlight in order to carry on photosynthesis. But they are using the sun's energy to produce energy. They're making their own food, and that in turn they'll break down for energy. And then our last picture here, it's a little bit blurry, but this is showing a goat and it's showing a zoomed in picture or portion of that goat. And we can see that he is in fact living. He is made of cells. So once you get that finished, and I'll go back here, once you get this finished, just make sure to write each one of those down. The terms are at the top. Just, see which one applies to each one of those pictures, fill that in, and then turn that in. If you'll go back to your homepage once you're finished with that, you do have another video to watch. This video, we are on day 6. The video is Amoeba Sisters Characteristics of Life. And I do want to point out you do have Pearson Realize as well today. So once you click on Pearson Realize, it's going to take you to your class link. On your class link, you're going to click on the R for Pearson Realize. You're going to go to your Pearson Realize. This is the interactivity today with studying life. So you're going to go through and read each one of these, talking about environmental changes here. You can do the forwarding button. You need to read through each one of these. And then it's going to walk you through the characteristics of life. So remember, in order for you to get a check mark up here in the top right, you have to go through every single slide here. But I'll go to the next page. This is talking about a pandemic. In 2009, an influenza virus emerged from pigs that went on to affect an estimated 24% of the world population. So it's asking how could biologists from a variety of fields contribute to studying this widespread disease and developing a treatment, prevention, or a cure. So it's wanting you to put forth how biologists could work towards solving a problem. And then this is one of my favorite ones. This is just going through the characteristics of life. Again, your introduction here, it will go through your instructions, but it wants you to click on each box to read about characteristics. So once you click on the box, it will go through and talk about each one of those. This organism maintains homeostasis by maintaining levels of food, water, and oxygen. These seahorses, they are mating, so all living things reproduce, so on and so forth. So as you go through, remember, click on your completion check mark in the top right corner. Anything that you do not have a check mark on at the end, you need to go back and make sure you're complete with that. And then once you get finished with your interactivity, it's not showing on mine, but at the top left, you will have a quiz bar. So make sure you go and complete that quiz bar. So that's it for characteristics of life. You need to go and watch your video, complete your notes, turn in your notes on Kami, make sure you've completed your workbook pages, and then complete your Pearson Realize. Okay, thank you, and I'll see you next time, and let's go do some biology.